Greetings, everyone. Obviously, incredible weekend at FSU, both Friday and Saturday. Kind of going to go through all this because there's a lot to unpack, especially for Saturday, which was the big event as far as the Legacy Weekend. But Friday was an extremely busy day. I think all the focus, I guess, going into Friday was, hey, how's this visit going to go with Charles Lester? How much it's going to impact everything. And FSU knocked it out of the park as they usually do, with Charles. And but it was a little bit different this time because Charles talked about actually committing, and the plan had been just to go all the way deep into the fall. But I think that plan is kind of shifting. I think it gives he's given the feeling that a commitment and decision could be done by the summer. He also let the media know after his visit that FSU is going to get the last official visit for him. I think other schools he's going to visit, Georgia and Ohio State, were the other two that he mentioned. I think FSU sits in a premier, really good spot. I was already high on FSU's chances. Probably going to put in an RPM pick for FSU and next day or so after I check on a few more things. But I think FSU sits in a very good position, going into these the rest of these visits, either in the spring or in the official visit in the summer. I think there's just the connection with FSU is different. I think the meeting with Patrick Surtain and being around him was different. It was very unique to Charles Lester, and I think also just the feeling he gets there is just different than any other place. He's gone to a lot of places, but FSU's just separated themselves from I think everyone else. And I think the next guy to go into was kind of surprised to me, just the reflection I got from the visit. But defensive lineman Cam Franklin, he's a high 4-star on the On3 network. He's a guy that FSU got on campus last year. They love what he brings. He told me he's being recruited as a defensive end. Mentioned several times how he could see himself at FSU. He really felt like they connect with him personally. He likes how direct FSU is with everything, just where they're not like telling him stuff to pitches to get him on board. I think he really likes that, and it's resonating. It's really made a big impression in this recruitment. I think they've done an incredible job of recruiting this guy. It's not easy getting kids from Mississippi. We know how hard and difficult that's been for FSU, but I think Coach JP, Norvell, I think their directness and just the comfort level he has when he's on the FSU campus. Visited FSU last year. I think he went to a Clemson game, and I really just the vibe and the electricity he feels there is just a little bit unique compared to a lot of other schools. I think there's plenty of other teams that are heavily in the mix. And I don't think he's in a hurry to go ahead and just decide, but I think this is a guy that I think things increased a lot about how I feel about FSU's chances. I think that's a real threat. They're actually a real threat now. This recruitment. I think he sees what this FSU defensive line is looking like. That's jumped out to him. So that was kind of my takeaway with him. I think there was other prospects like 4-star Fletcher Westfall was making his first visit to FSU. Loved everything about it. Atkins really knocked it out of the park as he usually does with offensive linemen. I think he will return either late in the spring or in the summer for sure. I think FSU will get an official visit down the line. I think it was just really getting him on campus with the first visit was really just kind of setting the tone of FSU with a lot of those other teams. I don't think there's like a set favorite for him yet. I think Georgia, Mississippi, Virginia Tech are all teams that have been brought up to me constantly in his recruitment. I think those are some of I guess, the main factors with him. And then early in the day, you had got a 4-star wide receiver out of Phoenix City, Cam Coleman visited. I think FSU made a big surge there. I think they're definitely moving up his list. I'm not ready to say, oh, they're one of the favorites, but I think they're definitely high on his radar. I would still lean slightly towards Auburn at this point, just because he's been there a few more times. But I think Coleman's gonna come back with family to visit FSU, likely for the spring game, from what I've been told. I think that could have a even bigger shift for FSU. So I think FSU Auburn's kind of the teams that I'm kind of looking at. He did visit LSU after the FSU visit. Cam came over with a 7-on-7 team. They were there like 7:30 in the morning on Friday, so they certainly stayed around 5 hours or so. It was a lot of time spent with the staff. I think he really likes Dugans. He has really definitely noticed what FSU looks like on offense. That's been I think the big attraction of increased this interest. And then two, I think he sees what the family culture is at FSU. I think that's really something that resonates highly with Cam to go along with not just the relationships, but goes along with what the FSU is doing on the field. So I think that stood out. Three-star Isaiah Williams also visited over there. I think that was a very positive visit. I think he's a guy that I think will officially visit FSU. So I think those are some of the guys. And then I think at running back, the guy that I heard the most buzz about on Friday was A.K. Deer. That's a guy from Quitman that FSU offered recently. I'm told they covet him very heavily for the 2025 class. Probably one of the best 2025 backs, I think, that they like the most. I think Alvin Henderson would be my number one of guys that probably they want the most. But I think, and AK said, made it clear, like FSU's his number one school. So they made a big jump as far as in that recruitment. Several other Mississippi guys were there on the visit, but I think AK Deer was kind of the guy that I'd heard the most about. And certainly FSU already jumping up to the number one spot for him. That was a major deal. Had several guys that visited Friday that I'll cover in the Saturday breakdown. Luke Cromhoke was there. James Madison was also there, a four-star wide receiver from St. Thomas Aquinas. We know running back Cam Davis came there. He obviously revealed some big news Saturday. I'll cover in a few. Jason Zanamella was also there. Had a few other guys like Tristan Jernigan, who I think FSU started to creep their way up. I still like Auburn a little bit more, but I think FSU certainly made some big surges there. And then moving to Saturday, which was certainly a packed day as far as all the stuff they did. Kicked off with the Jermaine Johnson brick ceremony. Very emotional for a lot of people there. A lot of former players were there. Kier Thomas was there. Jay Sean Corbin. Obviously, Jameis Winston spoke, and he was also there. So I think having these guys on there for the recruits, and they brought all the recruits outside more, which is not something that's regularly done, but with the ceremony, they wanted them to see it, and all the kids heard a lot from recruits afterwards and their families of how this moment was very impactful. Jameis and Jermaine even got some really good recruiting pitches in there for a lot of the recruits that were in attendance. Wasn't just like their usual like come here. It was like, this is why you should come here. This is why this place is special. And certainly you could tell it certainly had a strong effect on a lot of kids that visited. First, I'll kick it off with Luke Cromhoke. He visited for 2 days. Spent a lot of time with BJ Gibson, from what I was told. I talked to him a lot. I think James Madison is another guy he talked a lot. Jason Zandamella, who visited also for 2 days. That was a guy I noticed a lot of communication to the visit. I think the number one guy for Luke was Charles Lester. They had a lot of constant conversations, watched practice together, a lot of laughing, a lot of smiling. Could tell there was a lot of positive buzz that was going both from Charles Lester and just these guys getting to know each other, and think they exchanged numbers. So I think certainly Cromhoke and Lester will be communicating a lot. I think the main takeaway with Luke was the way, what I got from the intel was the impressions of how he was able to communicate with so many guys, and being there in that 2 days, because that was tough. There's like 70 prospects or so there, and I think Luke did a tremendous job, not just pushing FSU on them, but maybe telling them some things maybe they didn't know about FSU, that why it's the place, why he picked it, and certainly what they can do in the future. I think he really did a good job. Heard a lot from different people and intel from families that were really impressed with Luke and just the way he approached things as far as from a communication standpoint. It wasn't real pushy all the time. It was really developing relationships, and just showing them different things that FSU can be. And then obviously I'll get to the big news. Running back Cam Davis now surprised everyone in the media after the visit, saying he's preparing to shut down his recruitment. And for people that don't know, Cam was planning for about a year or so. He's been planning to take other visits to other schools like Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. They're all schools that were going to be a major factor in his recruitment. And then Cam just shut it down afterwards. Just said, look, I developed relationships. I've been committed solidly to FSU for 2 years. What would it be like if I just all of a sudden go somewhere else and or visit somewhere else? And I think he felt like, I know this is where I want to be. And I think I've heard that he had a really good talk with Alex Atkins. I think that certainly helped the situation. But I think Cam's been thinking about this for a little while. So I think certainly that was the big news that carried the day on Saturday. Obviously, clearly another big offer that I think a lot of FSU fans loved was Jameis Winston's younger brother, Jonah Wilson, who's a 2026 quarterback. He got an offer from FSU. I've heard he had a really um, detailed and direct and genuine conversation with Coach Norvell afterwards. As I've said many times, these legacy offers are something they really have to really break down and seriously consider. And I think they love everything what they've seen from Jonah, of what he does in the pocket, his presence, his feel for the game, and then also how he fits into what FSU's doing. I think they felt like he fits that culture of brotherhood of what they love, and so I think FSU wanted to go ahead and pull the trigger and get in there. And I think it's a massive offer, and I think certainly talking with his father Ant afterwards, it was clear that was a big offer, and that was something that certainly an offer he coveted. And doesn't mean FSU's automatically going to land him, but I think it's a big deal because of just they didn't just, we're going to offer you because you're James Winston Rowe. They take time to really develop a relationship for Jonah over the year, to get to know him, see if he fits kind of what they're doing, and then later they offered. I think that's kind of similar to the path we've seen with a lot of these offers. So I think it's a big offer. I think FSU is certainly a major factor, and certainly a team that's on his mind a lot. So that was interesting, exciting. I think for not only Jameis and Ant, but also just I think the FSU staff to get that out there and show that, hey, this is a guy we're going to definitely go after. The other quarterback was on campus, this 2025 quarterback out of California, Michael Tollefson. He had a lot of positive things to say about FSU. I'm not ready to put him in the top tier of guys that I think like they're for sure the number one guy, but I think he's definitely way up there, right up there with Trammell Jones. I think Trammell Jones is probably the number one guy from what I hear from 2025, but I think Michael's going to play a major role in that. I think you'll see him back for a game, later this year. So that was certainly significant. Had some really good wide receivers come in for the 2024 class. B.J. Gibson, James Madison. James went as far as basically to name FSU the leader without saying it. But he definitely said I don't feel any place like I feel when I'm at FSU. So that's really certainly a big statement of kind of where FSU's at, and getting him. Madison's been to FSU around 4 times already. He's coming back for likely the spring game. um, and then with B.J. Gibson, that's a guy that's visited FSU more than probably any receiver. If you really, to be frank, he's been over to FSU around 7 or 8 times. Grew up a big FSU fan, so you knew that Jameis Winston talking at the Jermaine Johnson's thing was going to be a big deal. I still think FSU sits in the number one spot for BJ. I feel the same way, not as strongly with James Madison, but I do think FSU has the momentum. I think they're the slight leader over teams like Georgia and other schools that he's going to visit later, like Alabama and Miami. I do think FSU has captured his attention the most, so they certainly jumped out. And then even better, big news is the number one receiver in the country, Caleb Cunningham, visited on Saturday, and then came out and told the media after the visit that FSU's number one on his list. Wouldn't throw a party. Good wait. It's going to be a long recruitment. He's still really young. But the fact that FSU's got the number one spot already this early with just a couple of visits, I think it says a lot about what Cunningham sees in this offense. And I think that's kind of the general perception we've heard from a lot of these wide receiver prospects, was what this program's doing and what they're ascending to feels different. And there's just you have to get used to the different vibe that you're hearing when it comes to with the way recruits respond about this. They don't talk about FSU being a top 15. It's like top 5 national championships are brought up. So I think it was a big deal and significant when Caleb said FSU is his number one school. After that, tight end Elise Williams, who came also in January. Georgia was the team that I'd heard the most through the whole process, and I think at least kind of surprised some people again on Saturday when he said, "Yeah, FSU's the number one school for him." He's like, "Yeah, they're the team that I feel the most comfortable with." He visited also in January, like I said. I think FSU's done a great job. Kudos to Chris Thompson, the tight ends coach for FSU. They've really dove in and really connected with him from a relationship, personal standpoint that I think no other team has done so far. And I think that's the big reason that FSU's in that top spot. Moving over to the offensive line, there's several guys on campus, on Saturday. Four-star offensive lineman Jason Zanamella, four-star offensive tackle Ethan Callaway, who took his first visit to FSU. Four-star offensive lineman Mason Short from the 2025 class was also there. I think Ethan Callaway is the one interesting one because I think that's one that I'm probably going to insert in my next hot board. So that's one to watch. I think FSU made such a big jump. I think now there's really mutual interest. They're a real threat in this recruitment, even though it was only the first visit. I think he's going to come back for another visit. I want to say either the spring game or it'll be in the summer. He will officially visit FSU. I feel pretty good about that. NC State is the other team that I heard consistently around Callaway's recruitment. So that's a guy I think to watch. Jason Zanamella, he was on my commit watch. No, he didn't publicly commit, but you could tell by the body language. It was extremely high and positive for FSU. Had one moment where we asked Jason, does FSU lead or is there a team that leads? And he just turned around and looked at Moore, looking up at FSU. So kind of can't give me indication without saying it that FSU sits in a really good spot. I think he's likely. I think he pops if I'm predicting something later in the spring. I think he's coming for the spring game. I think you could see something happen there when he visits in the spring. For those that don't know, he's a teammate of Lucas Simmons, who was in the 2023 class. So I think FSU sits in an excellent spot with Jason. I think he's going to be a part of eventually of that 2024 class. And then I mentioned Mason Short as well. First visit, he said he was blown away by everything. He's never had those kind of conversations with head coach the way Mike Norvell, how direct it was, how really genuine to the point of what to expect if you're at FSU. I think that really jumped out to him. So certainly FSU is now a major player in that recruitment. Another guy that visited was Isaiah Autry. I think FSU likes him. I'm not getting the warm and fuzzies like he's like a top tier guy on the board, but I think he's a guy that I think they like, that they want to see more of, and I think they want to see in person, kind of work out at a camp, even though they have already offered. I think they kind of just want to see a little more, whether it's the spring or them seeing him in the summer in person. Now, a guy I do think they'd like a lot and they covet is Ty Helton. He actually came for the January Junior Day and came on Saturday. I think he's a guy I'm definitely going to put in my hot board as far as feature guys. I think FSU looks like a major player there. Not saying I haven't heard that FSU's the leader, but I think they're certainly in his top two, if not one of the favorites, because of that relationship with Atkins already. FSU likes him at the center position, so that's a guy to certainly keep your eye on with FSU going forward. Four-star defensive lineman Artavius Jones said everything, but I'm committing to FSU. We actually kind of thought he was committing to FSU the way he was talking, and certainly had a smile on his face the whole time with the interview. So I think that's a guy FSU sits in a great spot with. I think there was a pair of linebackers that really caught FSU's attention, and Jaden Perlot, which is a 2025 commitment to Georgia, gave some intel, kind of a lot of stuff we didn't know behind the scenes, that FSU had been recruiting him for a really long time. FSU is a school he's followed a lot, even though he's committed to Georgia. He actually watched the LSU game, called that one of the best games he saw all year. He's definitely coming back very soon, I would say, for the spring game. So that's a guy to watch. I mean, it's not often that you could see FSU possibly potentially flip a commit from the two-time national champs, but this is a guy that they're a serious player for, despite that pledge to Georgia. So I think they certainly set the tone of being a player there. I think the one that probably surprised me the most was probably Peyton Pierce, because of this is the first visit I think he's taken over there. I think Notre Dame and Ohio State have been mainly the teams I've heard the most. FSU really shook things up just for the visit. You could tell just the way he talked about, just the relationships with Norvell and the relationships with Shannon. And I think it was a great moment where he showed a scheme of Shannon asked him to pick a team, on NFL team. And I think he picked the Cowboys, and then he asked him to pick another team, and he showed the comparisons of what you could do in different schemes and the way he could be utilized in those schemes. And I think that resonated a lot with Peyton. I think the real and genuineness of what they did on the visit wasn't just always football. It was a lot of personal stuff that he felt really genuine in the way they came across with everything. So I think FSU's definitely in the top 2 or 3, certainly with there. Peyton will be back, very soon, probably for a spring practice or possibly a spring game. So those guys, they certainly made a move for. Other players, DJ Pickett, 2025 guy, I still think that's a Florida FSU battle. And then, of course, the one everyone's waiting on Saturday is Jordan Pride. He's committed to FSU, but Florida is pushing really hard. I don't think anything changes as far as the pursuit because Gators are still coming on strong. I think FSU getting him on campus. He stayed there for a while, went to the baseball game, and then departed from the visit. But I think the more you get him on campus, this is the second time they were able to get him over there. I think that's a big development as far as FSU because he hadn't visited before that in the previous year. So certainly FSU is getting him more on campus. He seems to be getting more comfortable with the staff, and certainly Patrick Surtain has already paid off big dividends with FSU. Really, the relationship is getting more personal. So I think FSU is getting a little bit better as far as movement in that spot, but I still think it's a major battle with them and the Gators. I don't think this one's going to be done anytime soon. It's probably going to go into the season, and then we kind of go from there. But that's kind of the wrap, guys, as far as the weekend. Obviously, it's really busy. So, as you can see, a lot of good things are going on with FSU, and certainly a big weekend. I think it was a lot of positives. Personally, as I close this down, I think there's probably like 3 to 4 guys that probably you can etch in this class that I think FSU is going to get later down the line. Maybe not publicly committing or in a day or so, but I think guys that you can keep an eye on that because of this weekend, I think they end up at FSU personally. But I'll have a lot more on the PRB in the coming days, just on guys I'm hearing more about is from the Legacy Weekend. But once again, this is Michael Langston with Warchant.com.